Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of Uncovering the Corners of the World podcast. I'm your host, Karina Kasmala. Using research and my personal experiences where I actually set foot in some of these places, I'll be describing some of the unknown attractions in both the U.S. and around the world. This week, we are back in North Carolina, the state that borders the Atlantic Ocean, Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. But we travel from the mainland to a chain of islands situated on the Atlantic Ocean, better known as Outer Banks, near North Carolina. Outer Banks is made up of 3 island areas, and the first one we are visiting is Roanoke Island, an island where its first colonists disappeared without a trace. In 1584, Queen Elizabeth I granted permission for Sir Walter Raleigh to establish a colony in the New World. That same year, Sir Walter Raleigh commanded Captain Philip Amadas and Master Arthur Barlow to sail to North America. They arrived on the North Carolina coast, known as Roanoke Island. In 1587, about 117 English men, women, and children traveled to the island with the hopes of settling the first English colonies in America, or the New World. Among the people who traveled to the island was John White and his family. John White was a skilled illustrator who documented the wildlife, flora, and the Native American tribes known as the Carolina Algonquian, who inhabited the Outer Banks. On Roanoke Island, John White became the leader of the new colony, and he sailed back to England to get more resources and supplies. Around that time that White arrived in England, Spain was assembling a fleet of warships to attack England. This caused White's return to Roanoke Island to be delayed. It wasn't until August 1590, approximately 3 years later, that White arrived at the island, but he didn't find a single settler or inhabitant there. There were clues left as to what happened to the colony, including the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. The colony became known as the Lost Colony. Centuries later, during the Civil War, Roanoke Island was occupied by Union forces in 1862 and became a place for newly freed African American families to live. The Union Army established a freedmen's colony on the island. Schools, churches, and in 1865, 561 homes were built on the island, and the population grew to 3,901. The freedmen's colony lasted until 1867. Today, visitors can read and explore the history of the Native Americans, the lost colony on Roanoke Island, and Freedman's Colony at Fort Raleigh Visitor Center, located at 1401 National Drive in Manteo, North Carolina. If you visit the Waterside Theater in Fort Raleigh National Historic Site, you can watch Paul Green's outdoor original symphonic drama titled The Lost Colony, which tells the story of how the English tried to colonize Roanoke Island. The symphonic drama is considered America's longest-running outdoor symphonic drama, which first premiered in 1935. While still in Manteo, we drive over to a 1 1/2 story lighthouse that looks more like a cottage on the waterfront. The Roanoke Marshes Lighthouse is located at 104 Fernando Street in Manteo, North Carolina. With black shutters and a red shingled roof capped off by a 2-foot, 4 inches tall lens, the small white exterior lighthouse stretches 40 yards into the Roanoke Sound. However, this is a replica of the lighthouse that was built in 1877. This is the 4th lighthouse that carries the name. The first 2 Roanoke Marshes lighthouses were built in the 1800s. The first lighthouse was situated at the southern entrance of the Croatian Sound in Wanchese and was built in 1831. Situated on the shore, the lighthouse encountered floods, and after 8 years, it was abandoned due to the extensive repairs. The second lighthouse was constructed in 1858 and stayed in operation up until 1872, when the land around the lighthouse was no longer able to support it. The third lighthouse, a white square building supported by 7 screw piles, was built in 1877. Unfortunately, in 1955, the lighthouse was no longer needed. It was sold to a private owner who tried to relocate it, but when they tried to move the lighthouse, it sustained significant damage. The current Roanoke Marshes Lighthouse was completed in 2004 and is located near the Roanoke Island Maritime Museum. Inside the lighthouse, visitors can see exhibits and a 4th-order Fresnel lens, which is a glass lens that concentrates light rays into one parallel beam. Within walking distance of the lighthouse, we glance inside a museum that is also inside a boathouse. Located in the George Washington Creek Boathouse is the Roanoke Island Maritime Museum. George Washington Creek was a local builder who built the shad, a type of workboat in the 1870s. He combined the conventional plank-on frame with the split log techniques to develop a workboat that sustained changing weather conditions, especially in the waters of the Albemarle and Pamlico Sounds. Although these ships were in demand, production ceased in the 1930s. Traditional boats and small watercrafts, such as the 1960 hydroplane, can be found inside the museum. For instance, the Elizabeth II vessel was constructed there. It's a replica of the ship that was believed to have transported the lost colony to Roanoke Island in 1587. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you are interested in learning more about the lost colony of Roanoke Island, check out the website roanokeisland.com and the National Park Service website on the Freedom Colony of Roanoke Island. To read more about the Lost Colony theater production, visit the website thelostcolony.com. There is also the Outer Banks website that provides more information about Roanoke Island and the Roanoke Island Marshes Lighthouse. To read more about the Roanoke Island Maritime Museum, check out the Manteo website. Have a great week.